One, two, three. Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome to the Magdalene Feast Reading Series. My name is Sapha Burnell. You know me as an author. And I am here today with the wonderful and fabulous, and hopefully the audio is working, Elana Gomel.
To everybody, I cannot see you, but hopefully you see me and hear me.
There we go. I think we just made sure that everyone can see and hear you. I'm gonna turn down the music a little bit because it's really loud. Da 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 da. All right. Now can I have you say something again, Ilana, just to make sure that it is actually working?
Okay, here I am again, and here I am again thanking you so much for having me and just hoping it's working.
All right, and perfect. Yes, we've got a thumbs up from our wonderful audience. Thank you so much
Great.
for joining us today, everybody. We are just getting going, so it's going to be a whole bunch of fun. I'm going to take off my book covers. Today, we are celebrating the beautiful launch of this bad boy, Girl of Light by Elana Gomel. Now, Ilana cannot see the screen, so what I am doing right now is holding up the paperback copy so everyone can see that artwork and the back cover of it. How excited are we, everybody, for this launch? How excited are we to have Ilana with us? I know I certainly am incredibly grateful. Let's see.
Thank you so much. I'm incredibly excited, and I wish I could see it myself because I cannot and I don't even have the paperback yet. But anyway, really, thank you again. It's a wonderful moment. I'm really, really excited.
We have gotten some welcomes and some hellos and some hypes. Lots of hype, which is a very good thing. Super excited welcome from Emily Armstrong, who is a writer of horror and all things dark, and is also somebody that is working on TTRPG worlds, so kind of like Dungeons and Dragons and all of that, but they're custom worlds created with incredible storylines. So we've got Anastasia, otherwise known as Heather Adams, who is a published author here in Canada. He says, welcome, Professor Gomel. Raven Wright says, well arted, hello. Mooncloud is here and saying hello. Everyone is giving thumbs up and hearts, which is a good thing. All right. I'm going to... All right, there we go. I'm going to introduce Ilana. Born in the Ukraine and currently residing in California, Elana Gomel is an academic with a long list of books and articles, an award-winning writer, and a professional nomad. She has taught and researched in Israel, Italy, and the United States, and is known in the Academy for her purely theoretical interest in serial killers, alien invasions, and rebellious AIs. She is the author of more than 100 stories, several novellas, and 6 novels of dark fantasy and science fiction. And today we are celebrating the release of another piece of science fiction, Girl of Light. Girl of Light is this novel right here in my hands. A voice through Svetlana's mirror guides her beloved motherland from behind its electric tower. The war with Wolstan is not going as well as Sveta and her parents hope, but Sveta trusts the voice. Girl of Light unravels Sveta's beloved motherland and in war-torn adventure through monsters, missing eyes, and broken mirrors. A dark fantasy with a Slavic punch based on an even darker history. It has been called a cerebral, nightmarish, but compulsively readable tale, and as powerful as the bullets fired from a Nagant. Congratulations, Ilana!
Oh, thank you. It's really wonderful. even to hear this description. I have written 6 novels, but honestly, this is my own favorite. I can't say whether it's the best or not because I'm not a good judge of it, but it's just like my favorite novel, and I really hope people who read it enjoy it as much as I enjoyed writing it. So you tell me how we're going to proceed.
All
Would you
right.
like me to read? Would you like me to answer questions? I'm totally open.
First, I would love, and I'm sure everybody would love to hear just a couple minutes, about a good 2 minutes to 3 minutes of how this novel came about. What was the thing that instigated you writing Girl of Light? And then we can go into our wonderful first reading.
Okay, so it's an autobiographical novel, which sounds totally insane considering that, first of all, it's a novel of dark fantasy. Second, it takes place during the Second World War, at least some of it. And third, I'm nothing like my main character, like Svetlana, and yet it is autobiographical. I was born in the USSR, so I was born in a country that no longer exists, which is a good thing actually. But the collapse of the USSR is one of those historical events which really created profound a kind of historical earthquake whose magnitude we only now begin to appreciate. And the story of Svetlana and Andrei is based on my family's history. For example, my grandfather died in the Second World War at the age of 21 when he barely saw his newborn daughter, who's my mother. And, I left the USSR before it collapsed. I never went back. I never went back to Ukraine. And yet, we're all haunted by our ghosts, by ghosts of our history and by ghosts of our family. And this novel is about my ghosts. And the question that I was trying to answer in this novel, and I'm still trying to answer in my academic work and so on, is how did it all happen? Why did it go so wrong? This was a great dream. This was a utopia, and it devolved into this horrible nightmare. And I am sorry to say, but in all of my academic work, I have never found a good answer to this question. Maybe there is no good answer, but this is what the novel is about. It's about my history, it's about my family, and it's about the ghosts of history, which, they don't disappear. They never let you go. What's happening now in Ukraine, in a way, is yet another ghost, is yet another mere reflection of, what in the USSR was called the Great Patriotic War, which is the Second World War to all of us. And in a sense, they're still fighting this war. And they will fight it as long as ghosts of history are around us. So this is what the novel is about. And it's actually part of a series. I wrote a couple of stories based on the same premise. I wrote a novella called Little Sister, which is sort of like a first draft for Girl of Light. So I'm constantly grappling with those issues in my writing. It's not the only thing that I'm interested in, but as I said, it's a novel which is as close to autobiography as I ever likely to get.
Beautiful, powerful, and I've read this a few times over. I was very, very glad to actually get a hold of it and read it, and just the idea of, I know we'll talk about this later, but sort of chasing history while at the same time being very speculative, and using almost that sense of allegory to build upon that historical narrative is just one of those things that is done particularly well with this book. And I'm so excited. Dazzlecat says Ghosts of History, totally love that. Our sound is all good. Everyone's got There we go. Everyone's got good sound going on there, and the feed is going really well. So, with that, we are going to dive straight into the first reading. Now, if you have Girl of Light, which I know some of you actually do, we are starting with chapter 5 of part 1. So, part 1, chapter 5. And I'm going to put the floor back into Elana's wonderfully capable hands and quiet my microphone.
Okay. So yeah, I will start with. I kind of hesitated about what parts to choose because I didn't want to start from the beginning. It's not interesting, but I was afraid it's the world itself is kind of complicated, so I wasn't sure, whether it would be understood if I started somewhere in the middle. So let me start with this first chapter, and this is was a chapter 5, and it's a meeting between Svetlana and Andrei, who are the main characters. And Svetlana is my protagonist, and as I was writing this novel, I had such complex feelings about her because she is in some sense is like me, and yet she is very much unlike me because I understand the dangers that people like her pose, and yet I also admire her. So let me just start with this meeting, and I can explain a little bit what happens later. And I'm not starting from the very beginning of the chapter, but from the paragraph which begins, the walk was engulfed in the soft silence of the snowfall. So what happens, she's just walking down the street and she runs into this soldier and who asks her, where he is. The shuffling of pedestrians, the screech of streetcars, the smart marching of the patrols, all had been hushed by the fluffy white clamps gently floating to the ground and collecting in an unbroken carpet, giving off a pale ghostly light. The only sound was a soft rustle coming from the soldier's feet wrapped in layers of newspaper inside his scuffled military boots. "Are you home, Liv?" she asked. The soldier mumbled something. "What?" Not very clear in the head. Shell shock. He was suffused with a sudden rush of pity and had to remind herself nurses could not succumb to soppy sentimentality if they wanted to do their job. "Why is it so cold?" the soldier asked sadly. "Not that cold. Worse last week when they had to turn down heating to conserve electricity. But it's July, isn't it?" "What?" Svetlana stopped and stared at him, hoping to catch a wink or a grin. "It's January." The soldier sighed and rubbed his forehead. The temptation to pat his hand in reassurance was so powerful she blushed. "What's your name?" "Andrei." "And yours?" "Svetlana," she said a little reluctantly. Normally she was proud of her name, which meant Girl of Light. That's what it means in Russian, but she liked the way he called her little sister. As if she were already a nurse, she told herself, because this was how they were dressed. "Really?" He stopped and looked at her, the gaze of his brown nut eyes as palpable as a touch on her flushed face. "I had a sister named Sveta." "What happened to her?" He didn't respond. "Did she look like me?" Svetlana asked, hoping it didn't sound too coy. "No, but you do look kind of familiar." A piercing scream cut through the brittle hush of the city. A black shadow, detached from the ruined building at the corner, ran screaming towards them, its ragged coat of loose skin flapping over its shapeless body, a monotonous shriek coming from the hole in its fist face, the thick hard fingers stretching towards them. "Run!" Svetlana screamed, but the soldier stood petrified. The sour stench of the creature washed over her, old blood and rancid fat. And despite the waning light, she could see with painful clarity the jaggering sack of its belly, filled to bursting with the larvae of its young, coiling under the pale membrane. He tried to drag him away, but the soldier stood staring at the enemy, his mouth hanging open. He was a soldier. He was a schoolgirl, dispensable. There was really no choice. She stepped in front of him, shielding him from the ravening creature. And then a powerful side blow sent her sprawling into the snow, and a deafening noise exploded in her ear. Svetlana scrambled upright. The soldier was bending over the creature on its back in a pool of black blood. Its belly sack split, and the larvae screaming feebly, trying to crawl out. In one hand, Andrei clutched a curved stick. A thin smoke was coming from its end. Don't! She screamed when she saw how close he was to the kulak and its offspring. Back off! They will jump on you. He turned around. His face was the color of the steely gray sky. What? What is this? It's a kulak, a fist, a big one. They're getting uppity, and the weather is good for them too, so cold. Kulak, he repeated apprehendingly. What do you mean? This is not a man. It's not. It's a fist. The larvae were now spilling out of the rent in the creature's stomach like a clutch of bleached earthworms. It was really terrible how their shapes approximated humanity. Wrinkling her nose in disgust, Svetlana stomped on them. What the hell are you doing? The soldier dragged her away. Those are babies. Babies? That? Suddenly, a horrible suspicion blossomed in her mind, and she backed away from him. Poor you, he whispered. He saw the change in her face and lifted his hand. Little sister. Don't call me that, she screamed. Hit petrol. But there was no petrols and no passers-by. The city lay empty around them, ice and iron and broken concrete. So let me pause here, and I will try to explain maybe a little bit what's happening and what will happen next. So this is a meeting, and when I wrote the first draft of it, I realized that it looks like the beginning of a young adult romance, right? A meeting between, they're both very young. Svetlana is about 15 or 16, and Andrei is about 18 to 20. But it's not what's happening here. There is no romantic involvement at all, and later on realize why not. They're actually there's the same person, just on different sides of the mirror. So the relationship between them, it's not romantic. It's not even between siblings. It's much more complex and much more fraught than that. So in the place where she lives, it's a place, a city, is infested by monsters. And the country, her motherland, is at war. So when Svetlana meets the soldier, she feels that she has to screen him from the monster. She's willing to die at this point for this man whom she has just met, because he's a soldier. The motherland needs him. It doesn't really need her. So this is the kind of person she is. She's pure. She is good in every possible way. And I don't want to give away too much, but let me just say that her light is worse than any darkness you can think of, and her good is more dangerous than evil. So this is what, but at the same time, she is a good person. She is she is a girl, right? She is self-sacrificial. She is, honest, straightforward. She's everything that you can think of as good, and yet she is also, as you will see, then she has to make a choice, and the choice she makes is so fraught that even I, her creator, I don't know if she has made the right choice or the wrong one, and maybe it's up to the reader to decide.
Now, we do have a question.
Yeah.
We have a question about the decision that Svetlana has early on to jump in the way and sacrifice herself instead of in front of the soldier. Angst Taze, author Heather Adams, has asked, soldiers are not meant to protect the populace in her universe or in her perception of her universe?
No, soldiers are meant, that's an excellent question, and thank you so much for asking it. Soldiers are meant to protect motherland, protect her country. She is willing to sacrifice herself, and the country is at war, so the background to it is that there is a war going on, and the enemy is really evil. Like, the second part of the novel is called Dark and Darker. So you have to choose between two different kinds of darkness. In any case, so no, in this universe, soldiers defend motherland, defend the country, and everything else is, if you have to, kill civilians to defend motherland, you do it. If you have to kill yourself, you have to do it. And as atrocious as it sounds, during the Second World War, Soviet soldiers were told, you cannot retreat. No retreat, no surrender. Anybody who tries to retreat will get a bullet in their head. And yeah, if in order to stop the enemy, you have to kill, civilians, you do it. So.
Yeah. And Heather had the follow-up comment of, so her responsibility is to maximize potential damage to the enemy, not minimize damage to her own.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
She is, as I said, she's self-sacrificial. She's willing. This is, for her, it's very simple. It's very clear. Her life is nothing. Her country is everything.
And Heather says, thank you. Thank you for clarifying that.
Keep asking this question. Again, it's sort of difficult for us to understand today. Well, depends where you are. I think in some countries this mindset still exists, but this mindset shaped the last century, and it's still, it's still with us. No retreat, no surrender. People were, soldiers would kill themselves instead of falling into the hands of the enemy. It happened. It might even have happened to my own grandfather. We don't know. It's again action, but it's possible that this is what he did, just more in order not to surrender.
Mm-hmm. And that visceral emotion there, it's so clear. It's so clear and it's so complicated. And you're right, it is something that readers who have not experienced anything remotely as visceral, they may, this might be their first real connection to that sort of emotion and that sort of what some people would call fanaticism or fervor.
And that's one reason why I wrote this novel, because I felt it still exists. I mean, it hasn't gone anywhere. There is a war in Ukraine going on right now, and I bet there are people right now who are saying, no retreat, no surrender. This is our land, we stay here. We in the West, we're privileged because we are privileged to be able to forget that it happened to our grandparents and our great-grandparents, and not just in Europe, but also in the United States. And yes, I was trying to convey this sense of call it fanaticism, but without this fanaticism, just wars would not have been won. Mm-hmm. And there is, as I said, it's just war going on right now in Ukraine. It's a real war, and I believe in some sense it's a, it's haunted by the ghosts of the Second World War. It's a great territory. Mm-hmm. I'm, as I said, I'm perfectly flexible, so I can read some more, I can answer some more questions, but shall we?
We have a couple of comments. One, this is a very good read. We've got actually quite a bit of chatter about it's like, whoa, we also have Jess M. writes, says, this is such a treat. And so,
Thank you so much, Jess. It's such a treat being here. Seriously.
yes. Daz says, this is a very good read. And Heather says, not having a war on domestic soil since Confederation is a lovely history to have. Yes. For people.
It absolutely is. But again, we're privileged here, but wars are going on all the time. It's not just Ukraine, there are wars in Africa, there are wars in Asia, there were wars in Europe, the Balkans, the 1990s. And then we're living in a world in which people like Svetlana and Andrei are not, are not fantasy. They live among us. They live and they fight wars that sometimes are necessary to fight and sometimes are not. And it's really hard to distinguish sometimes between just wars and unjust wars, and necessary wars and unnecessary wars. And this is part of what the novel is about. How do you tell?
And we have some applause emojis. So they're the closed hands emojis, which is basically like a. I'm having to translate a little bit because Elana cannot see my screen. So let's just field one question and then go back into the readings. Yes, Emily Armstrong says, all the applause, so good, loving this reading. And Emily Armstrong is actually the author of the this next question. And that is, how do you approach creating a dark and eerie atmosphere in your writing? And what techniques do you use to build tension and suspense? And I think we can use even just the passage you just read as basically a masterwork on how to develop eerie atmospheres.
Thank you so much, Emily, for this question. It's a lovely question. Different writers emphasize different aspects of writing. So I am a world builder. It's not because I think it's the most important aspect of writing. It's just what I am and what I do. So I know other writers may emphasize character or plot. For me, it always starts with a visual image. Always, before I sit down to write, I often don't know, the plot. I don't know how it's going to end, but I have a visual image. And this whole novel started with this visual image, snow on the ground, very cold winter, two people meeting in the street, and the sense of, anybody who has lived in the northern climate, deep winter, you have this sense of foreboding. Something is going to happen, but you don't know what it is. And so for me, I try to bring the sense through the image of this creature, right, that is running towards them. And if you try to visualize this creature, imagine something whose face is like a fist, like a clenched fist, okay? So, but as I said, for me, suspense is built by accumulation of visual images, and I try to be as vivid as I can possibly be without, making a movie instead of writing a book. For some writers, it would be done by a plot and so on, but for me, it's all about images and about accumulation of images. And even more technically, I try to keep a singular point of view. So there are some chapters in the book which are narrated from the point of view of other characters, including Andrei, but Svetlana is the main point of view. So you see everything through her eyes. And this is why it's so important for me that you like her, despite eventually realizing how dangerous she may be. Um, so that's a simple answer. Visual images, um, as vivid as I can make them, and a singular point of view, whether it's third person or first person. So in this case, it's third person. Um, so that's what I could go on and do with this. That's basically what I'm trying to do is to create a sense of almost like a dream-like. So I want my readers to be in this world and to experience it just as much as Svetlana is experiencing.
All right, Emily says, fantastic. Thank you so much. Really awesome advice. And she's taking all of the notes. So,
Well, thank you so much, Emily. I really, really appreciate it. And as I said, it's not that I think it's the best technique. Other writers do different things. It's just what I can do. We all write ourselves. We write as we are.
wise advice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Don't, which is why, like, don't take lessons from me. Just take lessons from yourself.
And now we are going to take, we are going to take a certain sort of lesson from another reading of Girl of Light to get to dive into more of this incredible and fantastic story.
Thank you so much. So now we're going to chapter 22 in also in part 1. And here it's actually narrated from the point of view of Andrei, who is a kind of interesting character. Okay, so let me read the first I'll start from the beginning of this chapter, not to confuse the reader more. So the first very short section is narrated, is seen from the point of view of Andrei, and then we switch back to Svetlana. So it's a chapter called First Kill. He now understood this planet better. Planet? Yes. Andrei had read a novel by a progressive British writer whose name he did not recall, and it was all about going to the moon. And then there was another novel about Mars. He didn't think it was the moon because he had seen the old yellow skull face in the sky. Mars? Maybe. But whatever it was, it had rules, like any other place. One rule was that monsters would be bargained with. Another rule was familiar. In a war, you have to choose your side. And the final rule was self-imposed and non-negotiable. He was not going anywhere without Svetlana. So here you get like a little insight into who he is. And he's a soldier. That's what he does. He fights for his country, he kills for his country, and he dies for his country. And he loves Svetlana, but again, this was a hard thing to try to convey. It's not romantic love. He loves her in so far as much as we all love ourselves. Okay, and then with next section, we're going back to Svetlana. Don't have any idea where he could have gone, Miroslav asked. Svetlana shook her head, but then a thought came to her. She remembered the sealed office building next to her former apartment. The place had electricity. If there were any enemies inside, they lay low. And in any case, Andrei could take care of himself with his gun. He told Miroslav about it, and he nodded. They settled. Lord Stone Rock was eerily deserted. The day betrayed its promise of sunshine. Fat clouds crawled in and released swarms of tiny smoke. Now the town was as white, silent, and fluffy as a New Year gift wrapped in layers of cotton wool. Svetlana trudged through the drifts piling up on the sidewalk with numb determination. Her hand was felt so light that she imagined it detaching from her shoulder and floating away. She was wearing Katya's clothes. Miroslav walked by her side, his face craggy and withdrawn. He didn't know what to say to him. She didn't know what to say to him. She had lost his wife and perhaps his daughter. She had lost her parents. But there was no common bond of sorrow between them, just heavy silence. Um, so let's keep a little bit. And as she died through the arched opening in the brick wall leading to a courtyard, she thought about it. This would explain why the voice had been silent while darkness flooded Lordstone Rock. What the foot's done found a way to blacken mirrors while at the same time spreading their poisonous words of darkness. It meant motherland was too. Svetlana gasped because the thought felt like a physical blow, and she suddenly understood nothing was important if her country was dead. Her parents becoming former people, she herself homeless, friendless, nameless, her friend missing. None of this mattered. Only light mattered. And Motherland was the last outpost of it in the world of darkness. Svetlana finally saw her experience in the children's home for what it was, a necessary sacrifice. Alma's death was meaningful because she died in and for light. She died, Svetlana lived. And the only way she could atone for her survival and honor the memory of Alma was by burning so bright that not a shred of darkness remained in her soul. If it meant dying, so be it. If it meant killing, so be it. Not a daughter, a friend, a future nurse anymore. Only a pure flame of faith and dedication. Svetlana, God light. So, let me explain just a little bit about the background of the world, because the world is complicated. In the world where she lives, this world is like a reflection of our world, only our world as it was during the Second World War. A reflection of the USSR through a kind of mirror, how shall I put it? It's not an alternative history exactly. It's an alternative history with monsters, which is why the novel is dark fantasy. So in this world, they don't have guns, which is why when Andrei shows up and he has his gun, people at first don't realize what it is, and then it becomes, he's being pursued because various sides in the war want his gun. So they use light as a weapon, but this is special light. It's not the light you turn on with a switch with a flick of a switch. It's a light that requires people being drained of their lives to make the weapons that they used in this war. So there is this reference to to her experience in children's house. And what happens, in children's home, and what happens in children's home is that children are being literally drained of their lives to make weapons of light. And she witnesses it. And as you're reading it, you might think, oh, this is a moment when she realizes that everything she has been taught is a lie. And she kind of does realize it, but she also realizes something, the lesson she takes out of her experience when this girl, Alma, when she dies to make the weapons, that will be used in war, for Svetlana, instead of horrifying her or making her turn against her motherland, her country, it's just the opposite. She realizes, it's, just as in war, you have to kill civilians to repel the enemy. She is now becoming like Andrei. She's becoming a soldier. So she wanted to be a nurse, a battlefield nurse, and she wanted to save lives. At the end, towards the end of the novel, she becomes Lady Death, not Lady Life. And So this is, and in terms of like the plot, they're looking, they're still in this town where she lives, Lordstone Rock. Her parents have been arrested. She eventually meets her parents, and bad things happen. Um, but her parents have been arrested, and she's with this man named Miroslav, who is the father of a school friend, and they're both looking for Andrei, trying to find him because the enemy is coming. Wolfstan is a country that is at war with Motherland, and they're coming to occupy this town, and they're trying to escape. And in the first section, when which is narrated from the point of view of Andrei, there's a little joke here because he is from our world, right? So he knows what people in our world know. So here at the beginning, he doesn't realize where he is and how he came into this world, and he doesn't really reason he's in this world is because Svetlana told him. But anyway, he thinks he's in a kind of science fiction novel. He thinks he's on Mars or maybe on the moon, and he's thinking about the novels by H.G. Wells, right? The First Man in the Moon and The War of the Worlds, because this is what he knows. But eventually he finds out what this world is all about. And again, as for Svetlana and for him, it makes no difference. He still has to go back to our world and to fight and to die. Of course, that's a choice. Sometimes you have to choose between the last part of the book is called Dark and Darker. You don't choose between light and darkness. You choose between dark and darker. So, okay, so I can, read some more, but I'm sure there are more questions. So maybe
We have yes, we have one question. One statement. Well, that just makes sense. If it's important enough to sacrifice that much, if you've already spent that much on something, all of our biases work to prove to us that it was worth it. Rejecting the sacrifices would render it worthless.
you're absolutely right. I cannot agree with you more. And this is the foundation of fanaticism. Once you sacrifice so much, you have to sacrifice even more to justify the sacrifices you've made. So, and this is a horrible, this is, what accounts for fanaticism, terrorism, you name it. But on the other hand, again, what they try to convey in this novel is the ambiguity of all of it. The Second World War was when you have to choose between blankly, between Stalin and Hitler, between dark and darker. And you have to choose because there was nothing else. And this is what we have, it's a different world, and she has a different, even though her world is a kind of reflection of ours. And at the end, it makes it very clear how close her world it is to ours. But yeah, that's exactly right. This is foundation of fanaticism, but it's also the foundation of terrorism. When you have sacrificed so much and you're willing to sacrifice more.
And I think, would you call, if we get archetypal with Sveta and with Andrei, what sort of archetypal journey would you give them?
Great question, Seth. Thank you so much. So, she and Andrei are her animus, right? He's her soul, and she's his. They're not like lovers or even siblings. They are, in Jungian psychology, we have anima and animus. So this is what they are. As for the journey, it's not a journey of self-discovery, because ultimately they discover things about their own world, which they didn't know. Obviously, Andrei didn't know, but she didn't know either. it's more a journey of accepting that you have been dealt a very bad hand and like embracing it. So I don't know in terms of Jungian archetypes what it would be, but it's not self-discovery, it's more like self-integration because they understand who they are and they live together and and they die together.
It's giving me so a lot of the people who are regulars on my streams will know I talk about Carol S. Pearson and her research a lot when it comes to psychological archetypes, especially when we're doing critiques. And in The Hero Within and Persephone Rising and some of the works that Carol S. Pearson does, she speaks of the nature of a destroyer as an archetype. And yeah, and how close it actually is to that creator or creatrix, or it's interesting. I was reading Girl of Light again, and just the thought of martyrdom, destroyers, all of the above, and yet not quite. It's I love how you sort of skirt around to make something that's even more complex. And we're diving into it, and it really becomes its own lesson in the lengths that people will go when neither of their options are great. Nothing of what they could do is like woohoo, yay, awesome. It's all like you say, darker and darker. It's darkness and darker. There's no win here in a way that we would consider a win unless we change our definition of what winning means. And in their case, it seems more like winning is a communal and more social aspect than a personal one.
Yes, totally. And this is one of the lessons of history. So going back to your question about it's very interesting what you said, and I would have to look into more of this research. I was thinking more about Jungian archetypes, and it doesn't really fit, except the fact that they're like twin souls in a kind of literal sense, because they are echoes of each other in different worlds. But the thing is that I don't really believe that we are totally autonomous beings. You know what I mean? Our choices are real. We make real choices, but our choices are limited by history and and community and all kinds of things. Most of the history, because history, we all like trail long histories behind us, and sometimes we're not even aware of those trails of history. So those are the choices she can make, and those are very limited choices. But ultimately, I think the salvation is a communal thing and not an individual thing. And it's qualified, it's very qualified, because the war may be won, but is it, what comes after? And we all know that, the Second World War was won and Hitler was defeated and the Third Reich was defeated. It was a kind of triumph of good over evil, except the good turned out to be not so good. So, and this, I think, what happens in every war. There is no. This is what I find kind of annoying about ordinary, quote-unquote, fantasy, is black and white, good and evil, and you can always choose good. Well, the thing is, no. Sometimes there is no good to choose, and sometimes there is no good choice to be made. But this question of archetypes, you set me thinking about it, and I'll have to think more about it and maybe write something else about it. But there is no happy ending.
So we've got another question. We've got another question from Emily. How do you, and this kind of ties into what you were talking about with history and the very real history that inspired a part of Girl of Light. How do you research when writing historical-based dark fantasy, and what are some of the challenges you faced in researching and writing Girl of Light?
Great question. Okay, so historical fantasy is very difficult to write, as I'm sure writers among your audience know, because it has to be, sufficiently faithful to the history you're writing about to qualify as historical fantasy, and yet it's fantasy by definition. So in this case, as I said, I was born in the USSR. I speak fluent Russian, I speak Ukrainian. So my own memories, my mother, fortunately, she passed away very young, but she was a dissident in the USSR, and I have family stories to draw from. So some of the stories, as I said, like Andrei, is basically based on my grandfather, who not only that I never met, but my mother never met. She died when she was a baby. But but I just read books. But this kind of history is close to me because, as I said, it's my family history. But I did have to do a lot of research. For example, like what kinds of weaponry was used in the Second World War. So he has this gun, a gun, right? I had to do research on what kind of gun it was. He dies eventually. Andrei is, he's fighting in the Battle of Kursk. And I knew about this battle, but I had to do research and just read books about it. So this kind of historical fantasy was relatively simple to write about because I had a background to understand it. But if I ever decide, like the novel I just finished now is based on Greek mythology and Greek history, and I have to read a lot because, not my field academically or in any other way. But my general answer would be, you have to have some connection with the history you're writing about. If you don't have an emotional connection, it can be a familial connection, as in my case, it can be just because you're particularly interested in it, but it has to be your history in some way.
What do you think, Emily? Do you have any follow-up questions for that? Emily is currently in chat, so.
Okay.
Thank you. Great advice. And then there is a wonderfully awesome smiley face emoji. I'll try and show you later. Yeah, I like that idea that you need to have some form of connection to the history that you're going to be writing about. It's how far would you take that, when you get some people, now there's a lot of people who are currently watching right now and who tend to watch my streams who are themselves aspirational in their writing careers. They wish to be novelists. They may not be novelists yet. They are still in that process of writing and getting published for the first time or the second time, or they get oftentimes inundated with the advice, oh, just write what you know, but where do you put that line between researching something that you may not have experienced yourself but have an emotional connection to, and when you should sort of kind of guide the story somewhere closer to some form of really, indelible emotional root?
I do not subscribe to the school, thought that tells you write what you know. Like, what does it even mean? We're not born with some kind of knowledge. You have to acquire knowledge, which is to say you have to do research. So I don't believe, and especially if you write speculative fiction such as fantasy or science fiction, what does it even mean to say write what you know, right? No, do your research. Choose. I have written stories, obviously set in different worlds. I have written stories based on African fairy tales, for example. So I don't I totally believe that as a writer, the whole universe of human creativity is yours, and we should make use of it. Um, but you do need to have some kind of emotional connection. It may be simple curiosity. You may want to understand another culture. It may be like one of my novels. I have a novel called The Hungry Ones, and it's sort of partially based on the history of China. But I lived in Hong Kong for a while. Um, Obviously I'm not Chinese, unfortunately, I don't even speak the language, but I do have a strong emotional connection to the city itself. I love the city. It's one of the most beautiful cities in the world. So in this sense, I did a lot of research on the history of China, on the history of the Great Leap Forward and the horrible famine that killed 40 million people, read endless books. But the kernel of my writing was my love for the city, the city of Hong Kong. So this is what I mean. Don't write what you know, but write what you love in some way, in some sense. Write what you're fixed to you. And it can be, as close to home as your own family or your own hometown, or it can be as far away from you as, as a country you've never even visited, but you want to visit. You want to understand what this culture is all about. So yeah, do your research. Absolutely. As an academic, that's what I tell my students. Do your research, but also have some kind of emotional connection that makes you do this research.
Now, do you have any advice on, say there's somebody in the crowd here today and they're like, okay, yeah, do my research. So does that mean looking at some stuff up on Wikipedia and then going for it? Like when you say do your research, I'm assuming that there's, where would you start? Like where would you start with researching a brand new topic or a historical event or even a city? You know, where would you go with that? How would you advise them on what good research and scholarship means?
Okay, so again, for me, because I'm such a visual person, I would start with a visual image. So, say you're really interested in the city, the best thing to do is to go and visit it, but sometimes, it's impossible. Just look at, we have so many resources nowadays online. Just look visual at what it looks like, right? And once you do it, yeah, go to Wikipedia, but Wikipedia is only the beginning. Um, it may sound like really strange, but if you're researching a new culture or culture you're unfamiliar with, start with fairy tales, start with legend, with mythologies. Fairy tales tell you so much about the culture. Start with something fantastic, you understand, or start with horror. It sounds funny, but horror, especially horror movies, tell you a lot about the culture because how they tell you what this culture is afraid of. We understand ourselves through our dreams and nightmares, and it's true about individuals. It's also true about cultures. So I don't know if you want to write about Iceland, say, right? And you've never been to Iceland, go to look at pictures, look at videos, look at go on Instagram or whatever, and then just read some Icelandic fairy tales, and I guarantee you will learn more about Icelandic culture than you could just by reading. I don't know. And history is important, but history itself in the sense of dates and names, whatever, it can be pretty boring, pretty dry. As a writer, especially again as a writer of speculative fiction, you want to understand the nightmares, the dreams, the underpinnings, the unconscious, if you wish, of a culture, and this is your research. So, but also, like, if you can travel. I love traveling, and it's always a good advice. But again, it's not always.
All right. Wonderful. I think that answers that. Emily says, "Thank you. Great advice. I agree. I think having the connection with the history is so important, and so do your thing, quote unquote, but do your research." And then Heather also said that Wikipedia is great for pointers to research. Like it's a great, like you said, it's a great starting point to be like, oh look, there's a whole bunch of sources at the bottom. Maybe I should, you know, take a look. Maybe I should see what points I need to kind of go through. We have a question Daz, from Daz, and then it is added onto by Emily. Do you do you do world building lightly or in depth? And then tagging on to that, do you have a point in world building where you make yourself stop and start writing, or do you world build while you write? Any advice for world builder's disease, quote unquote, aka constantly writing world building notes but never getting to the writing?
Uh, okay. So for me, I start at the beginning. I'm a world builder. This is how I write and this is how I read. Like, give me the most amazing novel with the most amazing characters. But if the world is like thin or uninteresting or just doesn't, I will stop reading. Okay? And on the other hand, I can read a novel even if it's flawed in some way, but if I find the world is interesting and exciting and engaging and, throws me in, I will keep on reading. So, for world building, I start with like basic outline. So I use various apps, it's very technical, but there are apps which basically allow you to take notes and create an outline of your world. But very often, as I start writing, I change the world. So it's a kind of dialectical process in the sense that yeah, you can spend your entire life building a world or several worlds, and I understand people who do it. I know there have been people, there are people who do it all the time, and I can understand the temptation. So what I do, I have like a basic idea of what the world is going to be like, and I start writing. And then I'm taking notes as I'm writing, because if I don't do it, yeah, I can spend like, my entire life just building this world and getting into it and getting lost in it. My advice, again, I'm not I don't want to sound presumptuous because people are different and writers are different and everybody have their own ways of writing. But I would suggest just have a basic outline. And this is what I did with The Girl of Light. It started as a short story. So already in the short story I had some basic idea of what this world is going to be like. But it was totally changed. It was expanded and modified in many ways as I was writing. But yeah, but without wolves, I don't really. I I won't read a novel if its world is not interesting. It's
I
basic. Yeah.
This is where I slip in a congratulations to both Daz and Emily Armstrong for their shortlisting for the World Building Awards on World Anvil that is happening this weekend at World Building Convention here live on Twitch on the World Anvil Twitch. So I don't know if you're aware of a website called World Anvil. It is basically a world building kind of like a wiki site, where you can build your own worlds and then you can design tabletop role-playing games or novels or manuscripts and things like that based on all those articles that you create in the world. Daz and Emily were both shortlisted for annual awards, and we'll find out this weekend to see.
This is so exciting. Let me just congratulate both of you. It sounds wonderful. I know this website. I just glanced at it a couple of times, but now I will spend time on the website. And congratulations again.
I can, if with Daz and Emily's permission, I can forward the links to the world to Elana if that's okay. Oh, Das win. There's much laughter being had. Ah, all right. Yeah, they're very both nervous and excited. Um, all right. And okay, so we've got a message from Heather. Mind you, heavy reinforcement for world building instead of writing might contribute to the world builder's disease of which you complain. Yeah, I think I liked what you were saying about, getting those notes down, getting that world build, that interest in that world build. And then as you're writing, there's the potential there to discover certain things about the world you didn't necessarily know before. Um, do you ever find that your
Yeah,
worlds
totally.
change? Yeah.
Yeah, no, also because sometimes, as you're writing, the demands of the plot may conflict with with the world as you designed it. So you would have to change something in the world. This is actually what happened with The Girl of Light because of the ending. I had a particular ending in mind, but it didn't work with the world as I envisioned it originally. So I had to change the world because I wanted this ending. So I think it will, because plot is dynamic. Plot is like timeline of this world that you create, um, and it will impact the world itself.
Wonderful. Okay, we are going to take a commercial break. We are going to be gone for just a couple of minutes and then we will be back. I think we have one more reading and we have time for one more question after that. So I will go through the list of questions that I've been getting, and I've been getting a couple questions on Twitter as well. So I'll go through and we'll make sure we find one that combines the feel of all the questions left. So we will be back in just a couple of minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
ask a one final question. All right, are we ready? Okay, let's see here. We've got a couple of people that have been talking. Okay, this is good. Okay, it's a great yeah. Okay, so Emily is saying that World Anvil is a great site, and she absolutely loves it. Um, and then there's a bunch of laughter. Daz says this has been fantastic, and I bet the video on demand is going to get good numbers. And so that leads us into this is the live event. The video on demand will be available both on Twitch and also on my YouTube channel. And so you will be able to see the everything in its entirety, and I'll also be doing a few excerpts of shorter portions to put on there so that Elana has even more videos to point people to, and I'm sure that will help as well. Wait. And then Heather says, wait, we weren't supposed to sit like blobs in front of our screens awaiting your return? Darn, I have been doing this all wrong.
It's like I am with you. I'm used to like Zoom, I just went to a virtual conference on Zoom, and this is what I was doing. I was just sitting there, looking at the conference zone in terms of a genre. So it can be dangerous because you will lose some audiences. But for me, I just find it more interesting. I cannot write a straightforward. I did try like writing a straightforward epic fantasy quote. I just can't do it. So or epic or straightforward horror, slasher horror. I can't do it. I just find it boring. And, I only write things that I would like to read myself. This is how I started in my career as a writer. Very often I found, I would read a book and I would think, oh, I could do it better, or it's not what I wanted to read. And because it's not what I wanted to read, I will write it myself. I often blend, there are genres that go together. Like, for example, noir. Right? So even cyberpunk started as a kind of blending of science fiction and noir. Noir still works very well with urban fantasy, and with urban science fiction. Now, the Girl of Light is more complicated in the sense because it's a kind of blending of horror, allegory, historical allegory, and science fiction, a bit of science fiction. But for me, those are all the genres that I like to read myself. So the simple answer, to your question is just blend genres that you yourself like to read. And it will work out. It will always create a more interesting, blending than each of the pure genres. But the risks are you will lose some readers. But that's at least for me, it's a risk I'm willing to.
Remembering to turn my microphone back on. Yes, absolutely. All right, that did absolutely answer that. I know we actually did talk a little bit today about finding the place on the shelf for your book. As in, you have a book. What shelf are you going to put it on? Where are your readers? Where are the people that are most likely going to enjoy reading it? Where do they live? Maybe your book.
Okay. So they live in. I write in English, right? So, but I expect that this particular book, not all the books I write, but this particular book will find readership in Eastern Europe, not necessarily in Russia, which has a lot of problems, right?
of Russian and Jewish descent, and in the 70s, she ended up being allowed to come to Canada with her husband and her daughter. And she wrote Small Things Left Behind, which is a poetry collection about her experience leaving the USSR and coming to Canada. And that too, she was the one who really kind of like cemented that these are the narratives that, as much as they are not necessarily somebody's experience for somebody who, was born of an immigrant family, but was born within, say Canada or the United States, these are narratives that absolutely cannot be lost and that need to be understood, and they need to be read, and they need to be something that becomes part of them as much as something can be part of them when they didn't experience it themselves. Oh, wait, no, hold on.
Yeah.
There we go. Sorry, the music was a little bit loud there for a second. I apologize, everybody. Thank you for telling me. Sometimes certain songs that come on, they are a little bit louder than others. All right.
It's interesting. I can't hear any songs or any music, but I guess I only hear you, which is much better. Anyway, no, totally. I agree completely. People need to understand, because, as I said, we all like drag trails of history, and even if we don't know this history, it still influences us. It's still like a ball and chain. So it's really important to understand this history. And it's I will look up this poet you mentioned, because the same, pretty much the same situation. I left the USSR when I was much younger, but it's still immigrant experience. But also, to understand the present and the future, you have to know the past. I'm hopeful, at least, that some people who are trying in the US, who are trying to understand what's going on now in Ukraine. And it is very important, it's a war that is happening right now in the heart of Europe. It didn't happen 70 years. And it's not about the history of Ukraine, but in a way it is. It is about the nightmare that shaped what is happening today. So I really hope that people who are simply curious to understand what's going on now might look at the light and this is kind of guide to this darkness that is now flooding the Eastern Europe.
All right. And okay, so I believe that answers. That's a brilliant answer, by the way. Thank you so much for that. All right, so we are running up to 6:29. So
Right.
I'm going to leave this up to Elana. I did say that we would go between 5 and 6:30, and I want to keep to that. I want to keep to that time, unless Elana wants to do her final reading.
Let me, you know what, at the beginning I said no, like, I'm much more interested in talking to people than to reading, but I will just read the last paragraph of not of the novel, but of chapter, penultimate chapter, chapter 8 in the last, and it's just one paragraph. So the mirrors now became as transparent as windows, showing the rolling meadows, the mighty rivers, and the proud cities of Motherland. And where seeds of fire fell, they were planted and bloomed and bore fruit. And their fruits were the Overotness, the Crowesses, the Cosmos, and the Fists. The words of the voice became the bodies of the enemy. So this is something that's an image which for me started this, this odyssey of the Girl of Light, is how words can give life but can also kill, and how words become monsters, and monsters that chase us throughout history and never let us go, even if we try to leave them behind, to forget about